Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to talk about one of my favorite movies, Brazil. I think it's going to be a great component of the architectural film series. First, let's start with some details. Brazil was directed by Terry Gilliam and written by him, Charles McCowan, and Tom Stoppard. And it was released in 1985, and it generated a relatively positive response. What I want to suggest as an introduction to this film is that Brazil is primarily a movie about heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Now, in other words, it's a movie that mainly revolves around building components and their effect on daily life. So, if we're looking for a kind of architectural significance for Brazil, I think that's really where it lies. The obvious interpretation, I think, or the more popular interpretation of Brazil is that it's a dystopian movie. It's a movie that chronicles the absurdity of governmental bureaucracy in a kind of Orwellian type of society. And of course, that's true to a certain extent. But I mean, that is so obvious that even the movie poster sort of gives it away, right? With this image of infinite filing cabinets and then this angel sort of coming out of one of the filing cabinets. From a more architectural point of view, I think that Brazil really tells the story of infrastructure and architecture in the service of a post-climate catastrophe world. So it is kind of post-apocalyptic, but here it's the infrastructure that takes center stage. Now, in order to understand this architectural point of view, I think I want to mention three movies that set the stage for Brazil to even exist. The first of which is Blade Runner, right, from 1982, directed by Ridley Scott. Blade Runner essentially set the visual language of 80s post-apocalyptic movies, right? The dark tones, the noir references, and what I would call a kind of architecture of accumulation, right? All the sets show stuff and on top of stuff and junk on top of junk, right? Now, the next movie that I think contributes to our understanding of Brazil is Jacques Tati's Playtime. And this movie essentially kind of humorously addressed the absurdities of modern bureaucracy and modernity as a whole, and really focused on the funny and mundane aspects of post-war life in Europe. And Tati explores these themes a lot in a lot of his movies, but the other significant movie I would argue is Mon Oncle, which was made 9 years before Playtime. And Mon Oncle, addressed the same themes of the kind of absurdities of modernity, but it focused primarily on this idea of mechanization, right? There's a lot of humor that pokes fun at the mechanization of everyday life, machines that are almost going haywire, and things that are kind of out of control. And so, for me, together, all these three films form the background upon which Brazil was made, right? And obviously, we can also include more prominent literary works like George Orwell's 1984 or J.G. Ballard's High Rise. But, if we're talking about the architectural significance, I think that it's really about this combination of noir drama and kind of comedic infrastructural absurdity, right? So on the one hand, you have imagery like this, which is dark, is dystopian, and it produces a kind of bureaucratic nightmare, epitomized by infinite Art Deco high-rises. But on the other hand, you have extremely funny shots like this. These are kind of awkward images of what could be considered sort of everyday, very real architectural situations, right? This movie is not set that far into the future. And so in a sense, the movie itself, from an architectural point of view, could be a critique of what Rainer Banham called the intestinal complexity of gracious living, or in other words, the kind of guts of buildings, right? And so Rainer Banham was writing a lot about infrastructure and the systems that make modern buildings work. And this Brazil almost takes it to an absurd point, such that Gilliam calls direct attention to all of the ductwork and piping that would inevitably exist in the future. And this architecture, this architectural stuff, is basically done in the service of authority and power, right? And so, Gilliam obviously calls attention to these systems, but he also celebrates them. And in a way, it's not that different from the British high-tech movement, right? I think there's a direct correlation between, I think, Gilliam and the British high-tech movement. I think they all were around at the same time. And we can see this in the work of Foster. We can see this in the work of Archigram, these emphasis on systems and pipes and ductwork. But most prominently, obviously, we can look at the Centre Pompidou by Piano and Rogers, right? This is almost like the epitome of celebrating ductwork, right? And so when watching Brazil, especially for the first time, I encourage everyone to pay very close attention to the role of ducts in the movie. There's a lot of other metaphors and a lot of other references in Brazil worth unpacking, but I think it's really interesting and architecturally significant to see how Gilliam crafts an entire narrative around the guts of a building. And in a way, he reveals what would otherwise be hidden in any other movie. So I hope you enjoy Brazil. Thanks.